Hello, my name is Bill Haley, and this is for Haley 2024 The Movement's Government Reform Ideas. Now, this video is going to be on the law enforcement authorization sector and how do we authorize people to have inherent government power within the violent crime mitigation system. So, if you don't understand yet, what I'm doing here is I'm proposing a new constitution for the United States to replace all the state constitutions, make local constitutions, and that one federal constitution. All the same constitution with the words federal, state, and local in it. It's a lot more free enterprise, lot more liberty, lot smaller government for the people who want it, bigger government for the people who want that. It's competitive governance. So it's a new idea about how everybody can be governed the way they want to be governed, having only a very few things need to go up to the monopolized governance level. Now, this sector is one of the monopolized governance sectors because they have to authorize anybody with an inherent government power. So we're going to go to private police, private prisons, private courts, and all that means we have to have oversight and accountability. So we have this whole system has a lot better accountability, a lot better funding levels. It has a lot better representative oversight than the current system. So free enterprise, when you go free enterprise, prisons, law enforcement, and the courts, that does not mean a free-for-all. You get to do whatever you want to. This is a structure that's going to give accountability and make this whole system work. So let's go through about a 5-minute overview of the whole system, give you an idea about what we're talking about. If this is the first time you've seen it, please go look at the longer overviews. I got ones out there for 30 minutes, hour. I have a lot of overviews and many videos out there dealing with each section. And everything's at haley2024.org. So let's go through this system. And it is May of 2021 right now. Back in February, I kind of finalized the Constitution the way I wanted it to. Made very small adjustments since then. But it's basically the same Constitution, just clearing up a few little things. And by the end of June, maybe end of July, I'm going to finish off several dozen videos talking about the whole Constitution, the proposed Constitution, the CRA structure. So let's talk about what that CRA structure is, overview the Constitution, then get right into the law enforcement authorization. And again, this one's going to be rather rapid overview, so let's go through that. We're going to split all government power into 30 sectors with top-level elected leaders per sector. No one person is going to be in charge of, let's say, education and roads. Versus family law, military, being in charge of the diplomats, being in charge of the violent crime, the definition of that, being in charge of law enforcement officers, being in charge of the courts, being in charge of the prisons. Financial law will be have separate law top-level elected leaders versus food or education or manufacturing or healthcare. So you see that what we're doing is splitting government power significantly. So that's highly important that you know that separate legislative branches, separate executive branches per sector. Okay, once we have that understood, and that's on all 3 levels of government, federal, state, and local, then, okay, this is going to be the violent crime mitigation system, but let's go to another screen real quick. Within each sector, you have roughly a dozen different competitive regulatory agencies. These are competitive governance. You pick the one that you want. Your neighbor picks the one they want. Your neighbor gets governed by their CRA. I get governed by my CRA. The lady down the street gets governed by her CRA. Everybody picks that. Only a very few things needs to go up to the monopolized governance level. And this sector, the law enforcement authorization, gets put up to that level because they don't do any of the law enforcement. They don't do the courts. They don't do the definition of violent crime. They don't do the regulations of the prisons, or they don't do the regulations of financial law or anything like that. They authorize anybody with inherent government power that does anything within the violent crime mitigation system. The prison guards, the cops on the streets, the people who make violent crime laws, people who are judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and the like. So you have to understand that everybody picks theirs. Now, that's going to give their CRA more weight and more representation. If the selection you make of your CRA, especially for the law enforcement authorization, will give their give representative power when it goes up to the monopolized level. Then we have 12 different distinct rating agencies. That's a full mirror view of the CRA structure, but that's there to give high quality information from a wide variety of perspectives. And it's also going to stop so much stuff going to the monopolized level by putting rating floors. Rating floors are something that standards cannot go below because you're creating negative externalities, significant negative externalities. So if this is the first you have ever heard of this whole system, please go look at the overviews, but we'll go on from here. Now, let's go through the Constitution. I have a great preamble. Look at that. Citizenship, discussing that issue. The general laws. Every Constitution needs just general laws. Bylaws are more internal governance of each organization within the system. Federal, state, and local, how that's dealt with some. Or original authority, which level of government, what level of the CRA structure has top level authority, and what's the authority just to have laws in the first place. Supermajority, anything at the monopolized level needs a 70%, and the LEA, Law Enforcement Authorization sector, is going to need 70%. 40% to pull away authority, 70% to give authority. So we're not going to have a lot of people who are going to go to the extremes. We're not going to have extreme on to the left, to the right, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, libertarians. You're not going to get to the extremes. You're going to have people represented. Everybody, even the extremists within the country, are going to be represented. But if you can't reach that 70% threshold, which means you have to abide by the norms, you're not going to get that position of a judge, as a prosecutor, as a prison guard, as a law enforcement officer. You're not going to get those positions because you're not going to get the badge. And you need the badge to hold that governmental power. So anybody with inherent government power is going to need that. Okay, the parent sector board, how that's structured. The sector boards over top of each sector. And then the competitive regulatory agency. 90% of this Constitution is CRAs, competitive regulatory agencies. Everything else is a support for the CRAs. So it's highly important to understand. The rating system is going to play a vital role into the whole system. It's going to give high quality information from a wide variety of perspectives, but it's also going to put limitations on standards getting so low that people create negative externalities, significant negative externalities. Everything still needs to be paid for that we're currently paying for, even though it all goes into competitive governance or to the free enterprise system. So how do we pay for it? How do we pay for the military? How do we pay for prisons and stuff? That's within the taxation. Debt, how do we switch debt from our current system, which is very debt heavy, to our current system, which we're going to try to get out of debt. We're going to sell off all government assets to the CRAs or to the free enterprise system. Pockets of freedom, it's an immigration and foreign policy position. States partial acceptance per sector, it's to get this thing passed. Let's go through the 30 sectors dealing with what we're dealing with here. So we get rid of government welfare altogether, go to a charity system. Look at those videos. Foreign protection system, each one of these have separate elected leaders. So the top commander-in-chief is separate from the top diplomat. Well, right now, the president is both the top commander-in-chief and the top diplomat. No longer. We're going to have 5 different sets of responsibilities. We break up the responsibilities and authorities into 5 different sectors. So we're going to have a lot of checks and balances. A lot more accountability than the current system. Violent crime mitigation system, again, going into the free enterprise system, but the law enforcement authorization, what we're talking about right now, is going to be highly important, but that's going to be not much money there. It's just some personnel authorizing and taking away the authorization from people who are doing wrong. So if you are violating civil liberties and the like, your authorization is going to be pulled back. If you're corrupt, your authorization to be a judge, a prosecutor, a cop, if you're corrupt or abusive, your authorization is going to be pulled back. I'm sorry. Okay, prison guards and the like. So we'll go through all that in a second. Here's 5 more sectors, 5 more sectors, and 5 more sectors. It's all important. I will do on all these but it's important that we're going to have a understanding of that. And go to my website or look at the YouTube videos. I will be doing the YouTube videos on these soon, probably in June and maybe a little bit in July. Competitive regulatory agencies, it's a really important to understand what these are. You select these. There's about a dozen to choose from. Then within your group that you selected, just within your group, you elect your leaders and elect your representatives go to the monopolized. So on this sector, it's going to be mostly representatives that's going to have the overall power. CRAs are still going to play a role, but the main power of authorizing is going to be from representatives. But the CRAs will still play a role. And the CRAs staff the whole system, the sector board system, so it definitely plays a major role. But the authorization you have to get the agreement of representatives of 70% of the people. Anyway, this is at the city, state, and federal level. So it's important to keep on coming back to this screen here, where you see distinct competitive regulatory agencies. They're full governmental system, executive, legislative, and judicial. Each sector has all three. Every level of government has all three. Yes, you're going to make a lot of selections. You're going to be governed by a lot of different CRAs, competitive governance. But that doesn't mean more governance. All these things are split up. Right now, you are governed by local leaders, state leaders, and federal leaders. But they do all the different sectors. Your congressman and your president, your governor and the state legislature, your city councils and your mayor or city manager, however that works within your locality, they have all the power over all the sectors. So it's important to understand that we separate that. We separate the power. It's divided. It's not multiplied up. Even though we're governed by 30 times more organizations, each one comes with a lot less power, only within their sector. Even the judicial department. Okay, so we're concentrating on the violent crime mitigation system now. And violent crime is the definition of violent crime, and that deals with only harming somebody physically. The armed robbery, the assaults, the batteries, the rapes, the murders, and the like. Defining that, and also this one will have prosecution in there. So the victims CRA, violent crime CRAs for Sector 11, will supply the prosecutor. So everybody gets their own prosecutor, by the way. Every CRA. Not everybody gets individually their own. So let's say a city of 100,000 will have roughly a dozen different CRAs. So your CRA might have 8 to 12, maybe 8 to 12,000 people in it, and they get their own prosecutors. So if anybody within that membership gets harmed, that prosecutor can prosecute anybody in society, not just within their membership, can prosecute them for harming their member. Now they have to go through a lot of norms. They cannot violate civil liberties. They have to be accountable. There's a lot of systems there, and we're going to go over that in the judicial authority sector. I already did the video for the violent crime system. We already did the videos on law enforcement, and we're going to have about 3 videos on the judicial authorities. I had about 3 videos on law enforcement sector, touching on different aspects of that. So it's important to understand all this. And even the prison and corrections sector has to have accountability, because they have governmental authority to lock somebody up or monitor somebody and take away their liberty because they did harm to somebody. And it had to be prosecuted legitimately through the system. And again, a lot more accountability. Just because you go free enterprise does not mean no accountability and no norms and just free for all, do what you want to do. Nobody can get a badge unless the 70% of society says they can have a badge. And we have representatives for that. And everybody's represented. When you change CRAs from one to the other, your representative power goes with you. So one had 11% power, and the other sector had 10%. And let's say 1% of the people moved from the 11 to the 10. Now they both have, now one has 11, one has 10 again, but they switched. 1% movement going from one to the other means that they gain, one loses power, representative power, one gains representative power. And that's definitely important within this sector because it's at the monopolized level for authorizing. So every move from your selection changes representative power. So I'm going to talk about some of this stuff. Some of it's going to be clauses within the Constitution, and I'll point that out. And some's not going to be clauses. So this one's not a clause, but it's just talking about what we're talking about here. These are governmental authority accountability sectors. There's two of those. These are representative agencies. One's for the military and foreign policy generally, and one's for domestic law enforcement and violent crime mitigation domestic generally. So that's the breakdown there. So we're talking now about the LEA, Law Enforcement Authorization. I already have my video out on the military foreign policy authorization agency, and that one's already done. And anybody with inherent government power for the military, for the diplomats, for the commander-in-chief, they need to get approved and get authorized the same way a cop does, but a different sector, different representative bodies. Every person with inherent government authority, this is a clause. Every person within inherent government authority within the violent crime mitigation system must gain authority from the LEA, Law Enforcement Authorization Sector Board, and pledge allegiance to the LEA leadership. When you pledge allegiance to this body, you are pledging allegiance to the federal government, to the state government, and to your local government. And this LEA represents at least 70% of the people because that's how you got your approval. So this body does not have the power to do law enforcement. It has the power to authorize or take ownership or leadership of law enforcement if somebody chooses not to give up their badge. But that's about it. So they have the power to authorize a badge, and they have the power to take away a badge. If they take away a badge and somebody doesn't want to give it up, the leader here, the executive leader, can take matters into their own hands and command law enforcement officers to apprehend somebody who does not want to give up their badge, and they want to go out there and drive around in a cop car, still wear the uniform, still has a badge on or whatever. No, that's very, very society cannot handle that, and that is very destructive to society. So we cannot allow somebody to have a badge and act like they have a badge, wear a uniform and a cop car and the like, if they're not authorized. And because people need to be able to respect a cop that has a badge, and that respect comes from being accountable, being authorized, and the whole 9 yards. If they don't have accountability and they're just thugs out there, nobody's going to have respect for them. People need to be able to trust a law enforcement when they arrest them, that they don't have to fight because they're fighting for their life or whatever. Because they know that police officer has the authority of the government behind them. They know they have the accountability, and if they do wrong, that badge is going to be stripped. So there's a lot to it. Law enforcement sector's rating system must set a rating floor sufficient for cooperation to attain joint patrols and joint higher level law enforcement authorizations or organizations. Okay, what we're talking about here is because everybody has their own law enforcement contracts. Law enforcement at the moment of attack or of crisis or of need, everybody with a badge has to assist anybody that's in need, immediate need. Then your law enforcement company that you contracted with, your law enforcement business that you contracted with, then they have to take over as soon as possible. But if you have a badge, you have to help anybody within need, within the regulations. So anyway, so we're going to have joint patrols. You're not going to just have, you're not going to have 12 different cop cars going down the same road trying to protect everybody within the neighborhood because you have 12 different law enforcement business type of customers from different law enforcement businesses. So we have a lot of businesses out there, Everybody has a contract with a different type of business. They're not all going to have to patrol the same neighborhood. They can, but that's very inefficient. We're going to have joint patrols, and anybody with a badge has to protect. So it's highly important to understand. We don't just go free enterprise. I'm only going to protect the people within my customers that paid my law enforcement business. No, that comes a little bit after the immediate need. That comes as soon as they can to do the detective work and the like. Law enforcement sector boards must establish regulations regarding authorized police protecting everyone regardless of membership. So that's that sector. That's that regulation I was just talking about. That's a must. So that can't happen. You cannot be a law enforcement you cannot be a law enforcement officer without abiding by this clause here within the Constitution. Every law enforcement officer and law enforcement business must protect everyone regardless of membership within the mandated regulations. So I know those might sound the same, but there's reasons I had two different clauses there. And if you read it through it, you'll understand the differences. The law enforcement sector board must set conditions in which and to what extent the law enforcement sector board's elected leaders would be like the police chief and everything, sheriff or whatever you want to call them, are authorized to command law enforcement. So because we're going to have mandates that they cooperate. But when big things happen, you're going to have to you want that one police chief to command the whole law enforcement, anybody with a badge within that community, within the state, within the federal government. So when big things happen, you can't have a hierarchy that to do big things. But on a normal basis, we don't want that. 90% of the time, we don't want that. Only when big things happen can they take control. But we want cooperation, so the main police chief will still have influence and influence over everybody because cooperation needs that. But everybody's going to be run differently. Every cop will have a different employment contract, different rungs up their ladder. But the law enforcement authorization is going to also have rungs up the ladder, different numbers on your badge, if you will, saying you're a rookie cop, you're a seasoned cop, you are a detective, you are a master detective, you're FBI level detective, the highest levels and stuff like that. So there's going to be different levels. Different levels going to mean higher levels means higher levels of training, higher levels of experience, higher levels of integrity. All that's good. All that's going to have a history, and the law enforcement authorization agencies are going to have that history, have that knowledge, be in charge of the internal affairs of the police department and the like. Let's keep on going. Okay, now I'm getting to the law enforcement authorization. We're 23 minutes into it. All this is super important, what I said before, and it builds up to this. But these are the clauses within this. I know I talked about it, the LEA, many times, but these are some of the clauses directly within that sector. But everything else was super important, how it's structured, and some of the other ones were in other sectors clauses. But every clause relates to every sector. So let's keep on going. The law enforcement authorization sector is established. Establishing a sector means you get 12 different CRAs, and you can have the CRA do it, or you can have businesses regulated by the CRAs do the job. So if you're a law enforcement company, the CRA can hire you directly. If you're a law enforcement CRA, they can hire police directly, like a monopolized within that CRA. Everybody who pays membership fees pays the CRAs for law enforcement, or you can pay the law enforcement CRA a little bit, then pay your law enforcement company, law enforcement business that also is regulated by your law enforcement CRA. So it's two different business models. Private sector businesses regulated by your CRA, and making their own business contracts and the whole employment contracts and their decisions on buying a new police cars, what type of police cars, what type of weapons. Now, weapons going to have to be standardized to some degree, but there's going to be rules around that. But they're going to have flexibility as well. So establishing CRAs is a major deal. That means they get that set of responsibilities. It's not somewhere else. There's definite lines of responsibility between the law enforcement and the law enforcement authorization. These people do not do law enforcement directly. Most likely they're going to be former cops that work through the system and people who were detectives and they came from the business, because obviously we want people who came from the business that knows cops to do this. But we also want people from the outside to some degree, so we don't get the good old boys network, the thin blue line, don't ever criticize a cop type of thing. That's why it's so important to understand and select wisely when you choose your LEA, when you choose your police business. If you do have a police business or a CRA that is doing that thin blue line, never criticize another cop, never testify against another cop, if you get some of that, that's going to come out in the rating agencies. That's going to come out from other LEAs, and they're going to be criticized, and it's going to come to light. So that's going to not be very. It can still happen, but we have a lot better ways of dealing with that than the current system. A lot more accountability than the current system. When somebody gets hired, the LEA is going to have the information from all around the nation. Where else did you work? And able to go and look at what they did in their past. Well, right now, some of that's not available. And bad police officers go from one police agency, one locality to another locality or another state, and sometimes their history does not catch up with them. And the LEA is going to be able to handle that a lot better. So let's continue on. The purpose of the law enforcement authorization sector is to authorize and remove authorization for everyone with inherent governmental authority within the full violent crime mitigation system. 5 sectors there, and we talked about that already. The LEA sector has original authority at the sector board level because this is a governmental accountability sector. This authorizes. They don't do the law enforcement. Now, obviously, most of these people are former law enforcement officers. They're probably going to still have a badge and still be, quote unquote, under the ability to use their weapons and make an arrest. So most of the people within this, or especially the workers within the executive department, will have this. Maybe a lot of legislative departments or the rating agencies, maybe they'll be from the outside and they don't necessarily have a badge. But a lot of the people within this will have a badge as well. But at least some of them will. The LEA Sector Board must ensure law enforcement officers respect people's civil liberties. So we're going to talk about civil liberties on another video soon and have a full video on that. To be secure in their persons, houses, papers, records, documents, and facts, along with all civil liberties as defined by rating floors. We're going to talk about rating floors, civil liberty rating floors on another video soon. It's all going to be on my website soon. And a lot of this is already on my website. The whole Constitution's on my website. But some of this, I haven't got to my website yet, but we'll get to it. The LEA sectors authorizes with a 70% vote and repeals authorization with a 40% vote. The Sector 13 rating system must have a rating floor to ensure suitable staffing of people with inherent governmental authority. So you see that, you can understand that if you require 70% and everybody's just kind of not like everybody else, you're going to have to compromise in the middle. But let's say you have 35% of the people, representatives of 35% of the people that are just like, I don't want any law enforcement whatsoever. Well, that can't stand. So I have a rating floor dealing with to ensure suitable staffing. So another set of another sector, or I'm sorry, the same sector, but the rating system from that sector, another representative body can say, no, we need staffing, and you need to make it happen. You need to cooperate. You need to get rid of your extremists. You need to have people within your you still get to pick your people, but they have to have good ratings. They have to have good ethics. They have to not be abusive. They have to be patriotic and be loyal in the whole 9 yards. So let's continue. But I do see the problem with the 70%, but I also have a solution for that if we don't get enough people, enough staffing. The LEA Executive Leader has the authority to direct all law enforcement regarding the enforcement of an unacceptance of the repeal of a law enforcement authority. So I know unacceptance is not usually a word that people use, but it's a word here. If somebody does not accept their badge being pulled, the executive leader of the law enforcement agency can direct any law enforcement officer, anybody with that badge within that regulations, to go arrest that person who did not give up their badge. So basically, if one or two people choose, I'm going to keep my badge, I don't care what you guys say, this is free market, I get to do what I want to do. No. The LEA sector can say, no, we took that badge away from you for good reason. The representatives of the people took it away from you, and you cannot hold that badge. And they can direct any law enforcement officer to go and take you down, arrest you. The CRAs within the LEA sector is responsible for law enforcement academies. So it's highly important to understand. We have a problem right now where certain localities train a fireman or a police officer, EMT or whatever, with many, many months of training, puts in tens of thousands of dollars towards getting somebody ready to be productive. And they work for 6 months, maybe a year with that locality, and then they switch to another locality. But that money to train them up also left. So we have to understand that we're trying to make it more even, have the training of somebody separate from the law enforcement businesses doing the training. So the law enforcement businesses can hire somebody who's already trained. And I know there's still going to be rookies. There's still going to be some issues, but this is going to take away some of the problems. Having people get trained up in one locality and take all that money, and that locality loses that money because that person that they trained up leaves for another locality with very little productivity out of them. So we realize that there's an issue with that, and there's a solution for that. And it's not a full solution, but it moves in that direction significantly. And also these LEAs, not only do they do the academies, they do for the judges, the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, the prison guards, anybody that they have to give a badge to, they can train these people up. And even the judges need a training. Right now, I don't believe the judges have as much training as they should. As long as they're a judge and they get appointed by the legislature or approved by the Senate and stuff, appointed by the governor, they get to be a judge. And a lot of times they sit without a ton of training. And that needs to change a little bit. We need better training for judges. Even though they might know the law, do they know how to be a judge properly? Do they know all the procedures? A lot of times it's on-the-job training. It's not the best. Plus, it's going to be a lot easier because every judge is going to be within one sector. They're going to be concentrating on just education or just on healthcare, just on finance laws, just on EPA type of rules. Right now, judges, they have to know everything from tax law, education law, to military, to everything. I can't go through all 30 sectors right now, but they need to know all encompassing, and that's not giving the best rulings because it's too much for them to know. When we sector it out within 30 sectors, and they just have to worry about their sector, it's a lot more compact. They can have better decisions because they are more educated in that one sector. And this starts at the age of 13, and because we want the LEA to teach somebody, the teenagers, how to deal with the police, what their rights are, when they encounter a police, what's the best practices. We want the police and the teenagers to have a good understanding of what an interaction of with a police officer should look like, what your rights are, what you should say, what you should not say, what you should be doing with your hands on the wheels of a car, what happens with a traffic stop, what happens when, I want them to teach scenario training for active shooters, or what do you do when you get robbed. I want the LEA to do a lot more teaching starting as a teenager for their members, because having a good educated populace is so important to have a better law enforcement out there. Because the law enforcement dealing with people who are not properly educated how to be, quote unquote, a victim or not to be a victim. What I'm trying to say is, if you're being attacked, what's the best procedure, and when do you call the police? When do you not call the police? When do you what do you do when things are happening? I want people to these LEAs going to teach people how to do self defense and the like. They're going to run shooting academies and like scenario academies, just a lot of different things, and they're going to be competing for your business. If they get 15% of the people, they educate 15%. They educate their members, and everybody's going to want to do. They're going to want to be the best of it, because as a teenager, you're going to want to pick the LEA that you agree with most, and it's most likely going to be your parents' CRA, but at a certain point, you can start picking your own CRA. So there's a lot to get into on when teenagers gain that responsibility. They progressively do it through time. And we have other videos that are going to discuss that, and it's all on my website as well. A 70% vote of the Sector 13 Sector Board is required to restrict weapons based on negative externalities. This is my big Second Amendment clause. Actually, I have like 2 or 3 Second Amendment clause, but it takes 70% vote of the LEA to restrict a type of weapon. And you can have a graduated restrictions on weapons based off of skill level, training, age, maybe mental illness, and other relevant factors. But to take away a weapon from society, first of all, the LEA is allowed to do it on a graduated basis based off of training and a whole bunch of different factors I have listed here. But it takes 70%, so it's a very strong Second Amendment freedom to protect oneself, holding, possessing, and controlling a weapon. You're going to get the best ratings and the best outcome when these LEAs teach somebody what holding a weapon means, whether it's a knife, a gun, what that means, how to hold that gun, how to possess that gun, how what's stupid to do with the gun, what's not stupid to do with the gun. They need to go through training. Every teenager should be going through concealed weapons type training, what to do, and going through scenario training and the like. And your LEA is going to be in charge of that. And again, people get to select which LEA they're going to belong to. Sector 14. So I'm almost done with this, but we have to understand the 5 different sectors. One dealing with defining violent crime and the prosecution of that crime. The law enforcement itself. The law enforcement authorization, which is this video here. How we authorize it. The court system. Let's go with, and then the prison system, but let's talk about the court system real quick. The judicial authority sector, the court sector board must create a system of judicial warrants that respects civil liberties properly passed as violent crime mitigation civil liberty rating floors. Again, I'm going to go over a video on that, talking about violent crime mitigation civil liberty rating floors and how that's going to protect civil liberties. And whether it's freedom of speech, freedom of religion, or freedom to be secure in your papers and the like. So, there's going to be a video out there soon on this. Sector 15 is the prison sector. Here's all 30 sectors. We're pretty much done with this video. Let's go through this. The 5 in the charity system, the foreign protection system, violent crime mitigation system. You see the list there. Here's your other 15 sectors. 5 there, 5 there. Well, you see the 15 there. And it's always important to come back to this slide here. Within the LEA, within law enforcement, within the prisons, within the violent crime definition of violent crimes, you pick the CRA that you agree with. Then like-minded people join together and they're governed by their CRA. And then those like-minded people also vote for their leadership that's going to govern them, and vote for the representatives that's going to go to the representative level. Highly important to understand. It's also highly important to understand the importance of the rating system. The more you learn about the CRA and you see, hey, there's going to be problems here, I see issues there, 90% of those problems are going to be solved by the rating system, by rating floors and the like. It's going to keep a lot of things from going up to the monopolized level, but the law enforcement authorization is that's going to be the monopolized sector, but there's still going to be major roles. Like I was saying, the LEA is going to do law enforcement academies. They're going to train everybody within their system how to deal with the police and the like. The best way to deal with the police. To try to stay out of trouble, yes, but also when you are encountering the police, what's the best way to get out of it? Okay, pretty much coming to the end of this video. There's going to be a lot more videos dealing with this. I already had 3 dealing with law enforcement, private law enforcement, and how that's going to be better for the system. A lot more accountability, greater respect for the cops, what the clauses were. I came from it from 3 different angles for law enforcement. This is my only video for law enforcement authorization. I got 42 minutes on this. I'm going to do 3 on the court system alone, and that's going to be highly valuable. I'm going to do different aspects. One dealing with just civil liberties, one dealing with just the clauses within it, another one just taking a look at the courts, talking more generally about how things are going to work out. So, please consider a donation to my Haley 2024 The Movement. It can easily be found on my website, the donation page. And until the next video.